Hi everyone, welcome back to another live interview here at the Venture and Capital Sydney Investment Conference. Today I'm delighted to be joined by not one but two general partners from Bioshore Ventures. We have Reid and David Bottomley. Great to have you here both.
Thanks for having us.
Amazing. Now, I'd love to start with the founding story of Bioshore. So, you built something that's quite unique in the Australian MedTech investment space. So, can you take us back to that moment, when you first came together as partners and you realized that, you wanted to create this fund?
Yeah, sure. So we've actually all worked together quite extensively in the past. So Will and I, we've been long-term business partners, building, scaling and selling Australian-focused medtech businesses. And so we, in about 2019, started to invest in some early stage Australian medical and biotechnology companies, one of which was Tetratherix, that Will is now the CEO of. So we had some other interests in about 4 or 5 other early stage university spin-out level technologies. And Dave at that time was running the Reid Innovation Fund. And so Dave's fund was actually the cornerstone investor in Tetratherix. So that's where Dave and Will and I really started to work together. And then Andrew Fox-Smith, who's our other general partner, I've worked with him over the years, either on the board or providing some early stage seed capital for some orthopedic focused medtech businesses. So we've all got quite a long working history together. But it was actually Dave's idea to, rather than raise money for each one of these companies individually, put a fund together so that we could deploy capital into these opportunities that we've been working on for quite some time.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, the concept was really get a range of skill sets together who've got a genuine interest in the medtech sector. So, above the general partners, we've got an investment committee. We've got a bunch of guys and girls involved, from government to hospitals to serial entrepreneurs, who really sort of have an investment in the ecosystem and want to see it thrive.
Amazing. It's really wonderful how an idea came about to be so live as Bioshore Ventures. Now, you've talked about this gap in Australia between, our world-class medical research and actually getting those innovations to hospitals and clinics. So from your collective experience, what does that gap actually look like for a founder that's trying to build a medtech company here? So we'll start with you, Jeff.
The gap's huge, sadly. As we've touched on this week, we've got a world-class medical research sector in Australia, largely at that university level. So on a per capita basis, we churn out more high-quality papers and medical studies than virtually any other country on earth. And from that comes a lot of therapies, comes a lot of diagnostics, comes a lot of opportunity. But we've got a massive funding shortfall. And so that, I'd warn any budding entrepreneur in this space, is a real challenge, because unfortunately at this stage we just don't have that ecosystem to support research and take that through to the clinic. So you have to go into this process with your eyes wide open, because it's tough to raise the funding, and unfortunately we lack a lot of that domain expertise when it comes to working with the academics to bring their technology to market.
Yeah, all I'd add to that is, on the venture capital side, it takes a huge amount of resource to be able to really assess the risk around pricing, reimbursement, regulatory, and even being able to ensure that there's a ready buy for the asset when it's commercialised. So, for a lot of VCs, it's too hard. There's easy money to be made elsewhere. So what we're trying to do is obviously put our collective resources together to de-risk fundamentally each investment by virtue of the network that we have.
Absolutely. Now, when you were designing Bioshore Ventures, what did you decide to do differently? Because you're clearly not just another VC fund that is writing checks and hoping for the best.
No, well, we only know MedTech and biotech. So the decision to focus on that area was pretty easy for us. We're not generalists. Our backgrounds are solely focused on largely medical technology. So in that sense, and I guess we understood that there was this massive funding gap and knowledge gap when it came to helping commercialise technologies in the space. So it wasn't even really a conversation we need to have. We knew that that's where we're going to focus our efforts and attention.
Yeah, it's like they say that when you know, and you saw the gap in the industry, so you're trying to address that. So that's wonderful. Now, I noticed something interesting about how you operate. So you've already identified the companies that you want to invest in, rather than raising money first and then hunting for deals. Now, that's pretty unconventional. So could you walk us through why that approach makes more sense, especially in the medtech space?
Yeah, sure. So we have been working with a bunch of our portfolio companies for a number of years. As I touched on earlier, we have been with a couple of these companies since they were still in university, while they were looking to transfer the IP out of the universities into a commercial vehicle. So we really understand these companies and these technologies quite intimately. So we have this portfolio ready to go. And that's not to say that we're not assessing new technologies along the way. But really the premise behind the fund was to help commercialize and capitalize some of these technologies that we already genuinely believe in.
Absolutely. David,
I
your
mean,
thoughts?
I mean, the sector's crying out for funding, obviously, and there's a plethora of opportunities out there. So we're really trying to whittle down the ones that we're going to back early on. But even today, we met a super interesting company, New Zealand business, right here. That could become a portfolio company. So there's opportunities coming through the door all the time. And for us, it's really about being able to scale and be able to deploy capital in an intelligent way. To back these companies through, and obviously not spread ourselves too thin as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Now, for the entrepreneurs watching this who might have that breakthrough medtech innovation sitting in a university lab somewhere, what's your advice on how to actually get serious investor attention in this space?
It's hard. That'd be the first thing I'd say, is because there's not the ecosystem there to easily take your technology out of the university into a commercial vehicle. So be prepared to knock on a lot of doors and be prepared to deal with a lot of rejection. That'd probably be the first thing I'd say.
I mean, I just say, look, they're in a much more advantaged position at the moment because thanks to Oxford University, which set up an incubator fund attached to the university last decade, a lot of the leading institutions now have their own incubator funds. So the good news is, there is a resource attached to whether it's New South, Monash, Melbourne, Sydney, that exists. So I'd say that, there's a lot more structure and support today. For us, it obviously helps us if the IP is already squared away to some extent and they're already thinking through the commercial pathway, regulatory pathway. But we'd encourage those PhDs to look outside of where they are and some of the success stories here. And I think over time we'll be able to point to a lot of success stories which we've backed, because we'll be working with those incubator funds to commercialize a lot of those companies we come through. And hopefully in a few years' time we'll be a lot larger fund as well. So we'll be able to have more team, more resources and the ability to support more companies.
And I'd also say that grants are starting to flow again. We've always had here in New South Wales the New South Wales Medical Device Fund, which has been instrumental in bringing a lot of these largely university spin-out stage technologies, at least to the first part of the commercialisation journey. And now with the NRF and with a few of the other grants, the MRFF. There are some really good grant funding mechanisms out there now. So I think that's the first step on that journey, because from a VC point of view, you like to know that these companies have secured non-dilutive capital from the outset and they've been through that vetting process. Kind of makes our job easier to an extent. And we work very closely with a lot of these groups. So rather than approach a VC when you're still an academic at university, I'd say look to these grants as a first step, and by all means have those conversations with the VCs. But in our experience, the grants are the first stepping stone in that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is great advice from both you gentlemen. Now, before we wrap up, we're here today at the Venture and Capital Investment Conference. And Jeff, you were one of our panelists as well. So it would be great to know, how's your experience been? Any key takeaways that you could share with our audience today?
We've met some really interesting people here. And look, we're capitalising our fund at the moment. And there have been some investors, some family offices, high net worths, etc., who have expressed an interest in investing in medtech, biotech, health tech, but don't really know how to go about it and are a bit intimidated by the space, understandably, because it's complex.
Right. Yeah.
And so we've had some fruitful discussions with some people who have motivation to invest in the space because it benefits society broadly and they want to do good with their money. And so I think some of those conversations will lead to some meaningful, tangible outcomes for us.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Jeff's presentation was great. It really resonated. We've had lots of inbound as a consequence. So it's been a terrific platform. I'd also just touch on, like I touched on before, that we met a potential portfolio company today. So, it's been great. Time well spent.
Amazing. Well, it's been truly wonderful to have Bioshore Ventures be a part of Venture and Capital. And to our viewers watching, thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to connect with the team at Bioshore, please feel free to check out their deal room on Capital HQ. Thanks for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you all in my next interview. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks for them.
Thanks for them.